I'm Sasha Nicole.
And I'm Star.
And I'm Dr. T.
And this is Amerikan Therapy, the definitive podcast on all things Black mental health. And we're super excited today. We have another great show. Star, what are we talking about?
Okay, so we are based for our listeners all over the country, since we have people everywhere, even in Europe and all over the world. We are based in Washington, D.C. So we're going to have a topic that touches every, urban Black community. But we've got two all-stars from Washington, D.C. on the show. So we're talking about, ending the violence epidemic in our urban cities and how do we do it? And how does violence impact our mental health?
Absolutely. So starter up, we have Mr. Ronald Motten, who is a successful author of Drinking Muddy Water, an urban violence prevention specialist and professional community organizer and advocate for the citizens of Washington, D.C. and beyond. The purpose of his nonviolent advocacy is he experienced it personally, professionally, is to advance the quality of life for the fellow Washingtonians who need the most love to rise above their challenges and pursue happiness as productive citizens. He's a fifth-generation Washingtonian and father of 3 boys and 2 girls, and has deep roots in the community, which has been a key to his success as an advocate. And then we also have Jimmy Jenkins, who at a very young age enjoyed playing all sports, but unfortunately he was labeled as a risk. He had graduated from Hyde Leadership Public Charter School in 2008, and during his tenure at Hyde, he received the Mr. Hyde Golden Boot Award and the Blue Charter School Award, which recognizes students who overcame previous issues with following school mission and goals. He's a man of God with an intense passion for impacting and uplifting individuals of urban communities while helping them reach their full potential and ability. He was also later hired as Hyde's facility manager and head coach of the girls' varsity basketball team, and this also allowed him to regain his love for the game of basketball. And in 2013, Jimmy began a summer sports camp mentoring program in a paint company. He serves as the CEO of Manpower DC, that was also founded to exist the next generation leaders and their families in DC. So we're super excited to have both of these men on to talk about, as Star mentioned, the impact of violence that is plaguing many of our communities across the country. So let's just get it started. So for the both of you, can you share, growing up in DC, being around a lot of and experiencing violence, how that impacted you as a man, and how were you able to navigate from around that and now be in a position to help others? And I guess we'll start with you, Ronald.
Luckily I grew up uptown. I mean, we had violence, but it was a little different in the Southeast. It's kind of like if you stayed away from certain type of people, even if you was in the streets, not that you just was doing stuff crazy, normally violence didn't knock on your door. And then, crack came to our communities, and people from outside of our community came to our communities, and drugs and guns came to our community. Well, a different type of drug came to our community, because we always had drugs. We always had dope. We always had powder cocaine, but crack was a different animal back then. It changed the whole landscape of even uptown, and you start seeing violence throughout our city. But still, I had different morals and principles, because I wasn't like a lot of our young people that we see now. We're responding to the effects of disparities and a lack of equity and everything that poverty and things like this create, right? So when we came up before crack, you had a village, whether it was Southeast, whether it was Northwest. If something happened in the community, even that child, parents was on drugs, you had a community that wrapped their arms around. I'm gonna take it a step deeper. When I came up, the police wasn't my enemy. Why? Because as a child, we had officer friendly program where the police came and picked us up from school, took us to football games like Jimmy was talking about. They were our coaches. They knew our parents. So a lot of people in my generation wanted to be the police. The police wasn't looked at as an enemy until the jump outs came during the crack epidemic, and they would beat your ass and do anal checks and all type of things that brought that relationship that goes back to slavery, but took it back to it was where we were at slavery, and got rid of all the work that was done from the officer-friendly program. So I got to see kind of like both sides of how that even worked. And, I got to see like the killers and people. And I never forget this one guy who I was talking to who was a killer. They used to call him Teflon, and I won't go into his name and all that, but he beat a lot of cases. But, you know, when you ever saw him with a child, he would do anything for a child, but if a guy disrespect him, he had no problem with killing him. But when you go back to his story, you find out that he saw a man beat his mother with a hammer, and he never got therapy. And this man used to abuse his mother, and he would try to help her, and he would like smack him like he was a little fly. So whenever a man disrespected him in the streets or wherever it was, you know what he did, right? And this is what we're dealing with now in our community. We have a lot of hurt people, and one of the civil rights leaders who trained me gave us a piece of Hollis' theory a long time ago was hurt people, and I added a twist to it, heal people, right? So in our community, we have a lot of people walking around broken to pieces, and we're not doing a good job of putting them back together and giving them a fair chance of being successful or holding them accountable.
So that's a good thought, Ronald. Jimmy, you being from a different generation, what has it been like for you? Because we often will say, well, I say a lot, these young boys, like they do things different. Like it's not the same rules and that apply that I'm more familiar with. And, you know, what has it been like for you navigating through that and what you see and how have you been able to at least try to get some people on board with preventing some of that violence?
Well, first I want to commend Mo. As y'all know, Mo been doing this for a while. Even with the things that Mo did with Peaceaholics, they actually was in our neighborhood. We have one of the toughest neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. That was Robson Place, Southeast, where I was born and raised. And I think there's two things that's going on today. The first thing is that a lot of the big homies or the guys who had say-so in the community who had a voice that really ran the blocks, a lot of those dudes they either been killed or they either locked up. And so now we at a time where there's no structure, there's no morals, there's no more principles out on the streets. And so a lot of times people don't understand the importance of having, you know, they from a different lens, they look at hustlers and big time drug dealers as guys who messed up the community, but really they was only taking what, you know, this system and this government have given them and took it to a level where they can provide for their families. But there was morals and principles and there was structure in the streets then. And so I think it was designed to take those guys out of the communities. And what we see is today is what, you know, the reaps of why it's important to have those men in the community. And then the second thing is that we have folks who may come in our community to do the work. And they look at it from a book or a study and feel like that they can work with our kids or these at-risk young men and young ladies. And the reality is, no matter what you do, if you don't have a relationship when it comes to this work, we cannot move that generation or move this population. And so we have young people who already live in households where they may see substance abuse or they may see, domestic violence and, you know, all these different things. And so they don't feel loved. And so when they go out into the streets and they got a guy who have an influence on them, because young people have influence on each other, may give them a pistol. And that might be a token of love because they don't feel safe. And so if they feel that that's the love that they have, you know, they might fall in that line of the streets where the streets don't have structure. And so it's just so many different layers, man. And I feel like I'm a tweener because I'm just 31, but, you know, I be around guys like the Ronald Mottens and even dudes who may have came home that may be 50 or 45 that I hang with regularly, and I can have conversations with them. But then I can be with the young dudes who may be 16, 15, and guys my age. So it's like I'm a tweener, but it's like I kind of understand, you know, all the perspectives. But it's like, you know, you have a person like me who may not receive a certain amount of, support or resources so I could help and be impactful. So, I mean, it's a lot with that.
So Dr. Royster, I mean, I love both of them talk about trauma, both gentlemen, you both talked about trauma and the connection of trauma and lack of resources to, the choices and activities that are taking place in our community yesteryear and currently. Like, can you share how that connection works? And then how do we even begin to, not how do we do it, but what's the starting point to dismantle those impacts?
So I tell you,
See, we gonna hold on, Ronald. We gonna
okay. I'm sorry.
No, you like on there.
I'm sorry, doctor. I'm sorry.
I mean, both of these gentlemen did an excellent job describing trauma and talking about the impact of trauma. I also love that Jimmy added how things that look traumatic to other people can actually serve a purpose in the street and in the lives of young people that are living in these environments. And we oftentimes discredit the strengths and the resiliency that happens in communities because we don't like the package they come in. And so I just wanted to add that on top. And then another piece on top that Ronald added is the multi-generational. One of the things that we know, there is a burgeoning field called epigenetics, which is the genetics of how our bodies and our DNA changes from generation to generation based on the experiences. So now children born into impoverished, heavily violence-stricken neighborhoods, their genetic makeup is different than the generations before. Not that it can't be helped but it's just telling us that it's now coded in their systems to be on high alert at all times. Their systems don't have that neutral place that most of us start as infants. They are born with the genetics that are saying danger, right? So when your system is running in overdrive all the time from birth, we've got to start with healing all systems. I just told a gentleman that I saw yesterday, he was 64 years old and he had more trauma. I mean, I've heard tons of stories in the last 20 years. And I just thought, Lord have mercy, this guy's story sounded like Job, right? It was amazing. Lord. And still there is hope because our brains are malleable. Our brains are constantly evolving. And so even in the most impaired or impacted communities, if we do the things that are necessary, really Jimmy and Ron's point of the solutions are always going to come from within, but we have to trust and have enough faith in the people and their knowledge of what is going to work for them and how to bring the people in. How do we use the strength of the people in the community? It doesn't mean they don't need outside support. There's a difference in outside support and outside intervention. And just nationwide, we have struggled with.
What are the differences? That's a good point, but when you say intervention versus support, what is that?
And so they're all interventions, but what I'm saying is, as Jimmy said, a lot of times in helping, right, from the outside, we say, this is what these poor little people need, right? This is what, they're poor children growing up in this kind of environment, and we start to place judgment. They don't have any role models. They don't have any structure. They don't have any, and that's just not true. Many of these children are growing up in homes with people who love them and care for them and want to give them everything that they need, but because of the environment and because of resources and because of history, they're not able to do it. So when you come into a community and discredit everything good that's going on, that community is not going to trust you. They're not going to accept you. And most importantly, they're not going to benefit from your interventions because it's not coming from a place that they can receive it. So Jimmy and Ron's point about engaging with the community, using the strengths and not judging just because someone is an old head or OG and they've been to prison, that doesn't mean that their contribution to their community isn't valuable and can't be valuable. And as outsiders, we often don't value what communities bring for themselves. And what both of these gentlemen are talking about is, how do we use that how do we put the resources in those places that can help communities heal from within? There is no wound that heals from the outside in. If you ever go to a doctor, they're going to clean the wound out, and then the wound has to heal from the bottom up in order to be healthy. And sometimes you have to clean that wound out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times to keep getting out the debris, but to keep allowing the healing to happen. And oftentimes in these programs, we do very short-term support, very short-term finances, very short-term resources, and we don't give the community the time to heal, the time to clean out that debris, heal some more, clean out that debris until it can heal itself.
So Dr. T, with you saying with the programs, Ronald, that brings us to the point of, you had started the organization Peaceaholics. Can you share a little bit about that organization and the work that you were able to do in the community with that?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that everybody's been saying, it was a lot of work and a lot of groundwork that a lot of people don't understand, or a lot of people don't even appreciate, because like what most people don't understand, to Jimmy's point, like even for us to get people working in the schools, we used to have to we went to court. We had to get a lawyer and challenge DCPS, because they were like, if you had a record, we don't want you working with our children. I'm like, well, do you know that's at least probably 2 out of 3 of the fathers that we're talking about are the parents that you trying to get engaged with their children in the school. So you're saying you don't want a returned citizen in the school, but this is the population that you're trying to engage to get involved with their children's lives. So, and we understood that if you get bit by the snake, the antidote comes from the snake. That's science, right? So we understood science more than the people who call themselves doctors and lawyers and everything else. And this was like the world that we lived in, and we took and created a model. A lot of things happen like on the ground, and a lot of things happen by mistake. When I say mistake, we learned as we went, right? So we used to go into school, and we're working with the young people in the school. We would find out that we had to go down Oak Hill or DC jail to squash a beef, right? Or we would have to go in the community, and people like, well, you only can do one thing well. But we was like, well, in order to solve these problems, sometimes it caused us to go into the prison to get somebody to make a call on the street. So we would develop this model, and we would always fight and advocate for returned citizens, which we also changed when we pulled people together from different communities. I was meeting with people, and I was like, we're not going to be called ex-offenders, ex-cons, or anything no more, because if I go interview for a job and on the application say felon or ex-con, I know that's going to make the person think twice about hiring me. So we were a movement that didn't just squash beefs. We empowered young people, and their voices were heard. And the thing that hurts me the most about Peaceaholics, when we got caught up in politics, but we were really changing people in the community. And I'm gonna close with this. To your point, if we not empowering people in the community to be the change and create the change, all we doing is pimping. If our goal is not to empower the people who we're working with to be us and to really make the change, we're just pimping. And we had sent all these young people to college, 140-something children to college from the hood, and a lot of those children came back and became ANC members and everything. But my point is, they stopped it right when we were about to turn the corner in doing what the goal really was, which was to empower the people like Jimmy, right, to be the leaders in the change, because they're the ones who hear the gunshots every night when they went home. They're the ones who family members are getting shot. It wasn't ours. We escaped, you know what I'm saying? So we're not empowering the people who've been affected by this every day. All we doing is pimping, and we're not gonna have a systematic change to really get the outcomes of really end the violence where they don't need us anymore.
Jimmy, can you speak to how that, and like with what Ronald said, and how you started Manpower, and what you're able to do with the kids now through that, who are going through those circumstances?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer. Like, I mean, all of us kind of, we believe in a higher power, that God put us in certain fields and certain places for, certain reasons. And I think for me, the reason I started Manpower is because, like Mo said, I saw that the Peaceaholics was gone, and you know, all the organizations when we were kind of like getting ourselves together were kind of like, you know, leaving the city, or, you know, the city just stopped giving them funding. And when I got into this work, you know, I had started working with Trayon closely. And when he was elected as a council member, I think, if I'm wrong, Mo, you can correct me, I think 4 or 5 years, there was no money available.
10 years.
Yeah, for 10 years, there was no money available for violence intervention. And so you talk about 10 years of no resources available, and everybody is now, you know, they pointing the fingers, or they pulling their hair out like, yo, what's going on? Why does the violence look the way it looks? Well, you do the math at 10 years, how many generations had came up in those 10 years? You know, how many, right. How many communities have been shut down? Because I think a lot of people don't understand the role that leaders and government play in that. You know, when you talk about displacement, we have so many communities who have about 5 or 6 neighborhoods together, you know, in one place at one time. And so manpower was just to be able to come in, and, you know, we don't have the capacity to do nowhere near what Peaceaholics has done, but we wanted to kind of get the ball rolling, you know, and kind of empower people like myself who was blessed to be able to still live and be able to thrive and, you know, be a successful business owner, but just be that positive image, because people know what I was doing 10 years ago, you know what I mean, or 12 years ago. And to be able to see them, I didn't want people to see me when I get successful and then for me to come back and give back. I wanted to give back as I grow. And so I think that what made it more genuine and more engaging for the community, because they like, man, it's like as he's changing, he's helping us, you know what I mean? And so I think it's been more inviting for people in my age to try to get on the ball, get involved. But I think we all have a role as leaders, and even as the government, with all that's going on. We even talk about now that we highlighting trauma and mental health services, but it's like, yo, I'm 30 years old. I had some trauma that I never dealt with, like Mo said with that story he gave, that I had when I was 5. You know, so I'm 26 years in, and I'm now starting to see, you know, what's she called, a therapist, you know, and kind of talk about these things. And so it's like we highlighting these things after, you know, it's been a snowball effect, and it's like we always reactive. We don't put things in place to do preventative measures. So I know I kind of ramble all over the place, but it's just,
I want to say,
you're doing a good job.
I want to say something to his point, though. He's making a valid point. Let's bring that to what he was talking about to now. Mm-hmm. You have 5 children, I guess what we want to say 10 and under, who've lost friends in one school. Stanton, right, Glenn? Jimmy? One school, right? Yep. And I guarantee you, so that's hundreds of students who feel it, because they grieving, right? I guarantee you 99% of those children are not getting therapy. So what happens is this becomes their norm, and they become numb. So then you put them in situations where they get in a conflict, and they take this pain they have inside and have no problem with giving it to somebody else. So you see, because we back at that hurt people thing. And we know if we go to the other side of the river and somebody loses a friend from a car accident or whatever, they'll get therapy the whole school, right? For the whole year if they need it. But we got 5 students lost in 2 years in one school, right? And I guarantee you 99% of them not getting therapy. So we breeding the same thing that we're complaining about in our streets right now. That's what we do.
But Ronald, how do we, like, and you're absolutely right, but I don't want to say bigger picture, violence is a tool, is an economic tool for the city, and for most urban cities, it's a tool, one of the major tools of gentrification. Right. You know, this, like, you look at Berry Farms, that's sitting on probably the most valuable property in Washington, D.C. right now. It's the most, you know, easily accessible, it's waterfront, you know, somebody wants that property, and you have people who are now second and third, and in some cases, fourth generation poverty sitting in those spaces. So we know that many times when a city wants, or there's an entity that may want an asset or resource that's being, used by those that are in the lower income echelon, like oftentimes violence is one of those tools. So how do we as a community, whether we're from those areas or we're like surrounding areas, how can we make that change? Because the city may never give that money to work these programs. So how can we intervene in that space, given that there's things behind the scenes taking place?
So my thing is, I tell people, like even the people who take the streets, I don't go to the streets all the time anymore, because when I go to the streets, it's for an end game. You can protest all you want, but if you don't have a plan and an agenda to get what you want from that protest, you might as well be doing something else. I'm just keeping it real with you, because people get accustomed to our protests if we don't have a plan to push our agenda. It's almost like voting, like what Ice Cube is talking about. We talk about people say giving black people and minorities money, but black people only getting 3% of that money that they're talking about, right? So we got to be intentional and demanding equity, for ourselves, and make sure people who are going to give back to our communities get that equity, and make sure people from those communities get the equity. And I'll give you a prime example. Like what I did with Check It should be happening all over the city, because
what is Check It for, listeners that don't know what
Check It, it was a gang of over 200 gay gang members. It's a film out called Check It. They were terrorizing a historic gallery place in Washington, D.C. And I went there without any government money and changed them and created a business with them 8 years ago. And 8 years later, we owe $2 million worth of property on MLK. But what I learned from advocating and being used and abused was that people all over this city are getting property for nothing. Most of them don't look like us. But every time somebody goes try to help a black person in our community, there's always a reason why you shouldn't help them, right? So my thing was, I purposely didn't do a nonprofit with them. I did a for-profit because I told them we're going to work hard and show people we deserve something. And we're not going to be in a position where people telling us how much money we can make, which what they do with us in nonprofits, right? So everybody didn't stick with it, but the ones who stuck with it own the property. Names on deeds. Young people, poor young people, names on deeds, not just using them as a front or something on a flyer. But that needs to happen more in our community, because if people prove that they can do a little bit with nothing, they got to prove themselves first. Why can't we invest in them like we invest in developers? Or why can't we give them property like we gave our fellow Washingtonian who don't look like us the whole Marvin Gaye properties for $1? So once I found out how people all over this city are getting properties that don't look like us, I'm not mad at them for getting what they're getting. Like I tell people, don't you become a racist. You just demand that you get equity, the same things they're getting, right? And then you put together a plan, and that's what the brothers in the hood want to hear. They want to hear, if I change my life and I work hard, how do I get at the table? But my thing is, when you offer people things and you show people love, you can hold them accountable, because I'm not one of them brothers that's going to keep taking up for brothers in the street that's shooting people ears and stuff off. You know what I'm saying? Children ears. But I do understand how we get to this situation and what we have to offer people before we hit them with the hammer. Because I'm not going to accept that. If somebody shoot my daughter in the head, we're not talking about what you've been through. I'm just keeping it real with you. So, but for me to have that mentality, I got to be willing to offer these young brothers something if they come to me and ask me for something. They can't be just call the police.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Mo. 100% with Mo on that. I've been battling with, the whole situation with my little brother, being shot, just leaving practice, walking home. I was at a breaking point when it first happened, because it's like all this work you're doing and this happens to your family.
Exactly.
And, I ain't gonna lie, I had to keep praying with God, because it's like I had to stand on my word. If I'm telling families and telling individuals, to pray on it, let God deal with it, I need to say that for myself. And, it was a testing moment for me, You know, and what I realized at this point is that no matter who you are in this city, that it could be you that experienced, you know, trauma from gun violence. You know what I mean? And so I think we also have to reevaluate the things that we have in place. I think a lot of times people are just gun-hoed on, you know, yeah, we're going to do it my way or we're going to do it this way, and not knowing that this is life. Things changes. You know what I mean? You know, when I look at DPR and, you know, all the other things that we have in the government, you know, they have like the skatemobiles and, you know, all these things. I'm like, yeah, you know, that used to be good. But, you know, kids not into that no more. You know, they into arts, they into becoming business owners. And, you know, and that kind of led to me, you know, this year I got denied by the charter board, but I'm trying to open up my own school. It's the Garden School of Business and Entrepreneurship, because I realized that I used to have to try to be a student athlete and protect myself at the same time. But when they talked about getting out of the streets, to me, you know, Career Connections and all these programs were good, but it was like, you know, I made money in the streets, so it wasn't really motivating me to leave the streets. So until I became a business owner and I had a business mindset, it was like, yeah, I can do this, you know? And so I'm trying to find ways how we can really enhance kids and young adults where they at. You know what I mean? Like, you have people who want to be artists. You have people who want to make clothes. You have people who want to just do all these different things, but we're not really meeting them where they at, because the stuff we have in place is not really tapping into the direction they want to go in. You know, and it's like we present things to kids and youth and young adults and just like, this is the only way. And the reality is, if we want to fix it, we got to meet them where they at and try to create programs that's going to help them be successful. No matter how much you think, you know, your program you have in place is going to be successful, it may not work for the vast majority of these kids. And so I think, like what Mo was saying, like even with the property, you know, people like myself, I'm a day away from kind of being, you know, at risk again. You know what I mean? If I can't build and go to the next level as a business owner and I fail, I might be back out in the streets. You know what I mean? And so what are we doing to help people like myself who's really laying his life on the line on an everyday basis to really go to the next level? We don't have those type of things in place, you know? And so I got to go extra hard. I got to provide 5 different services just for me to survive. You know what I'm saying? And so I know if it's hard for me and people don't look at me at risk, it's damn sure hard for the kids who's out here don't even know what their next day gonna look like, you know? And so we gotta find some stuff that's just ready to go. When you talk about jobs, we have so many construction sites in Washington, D.C., but when it comes to getting folks hired just to do some day labor, you don't need a skill to do day labor, but we say, well, you gotta get a urinalysis. But it's like, yo, you just told these young people almost 4 or 5 years ago that weed is legal. So why are we testing them? You know what I mean? And so it's a lot, man. I get a little frustrated. I'm sorry, but I just get a little excited.
So how, Dr. T, this is a perfect lead into what you always talk about, community, because it sounds like people like Ronald and Jimmy, like especially Jimmy, you're a young man, you got the heart of the city and young people with you. How can we, maybe like, I don't live in DC anymore, but I got property in the city and, you know, work in the city. How can we start to create a more, like a complete Black community that's like, well, I'm not from that project, but I have resources and our connections and network, all of us do, that can help Jimmy build this school and get the funding he needs, or, you know, anything that we need so that we can, how do we do that and build that trust to do that?
Yeah, you know, that Star, it is a perfect kind of connection of what I've been talking about this year, the social fabric. In the Black community, the social fabric, Ron talked about it in the beginning, how we took care of each other. It didn't matter where you were from. Everybody had that social fabric that wrapped them, that took care of them. And as affluency and desire to provide more, as we started to pull away from our communities, that fabric got ripped and torn. And now today's children are out there just flying by the seat of their pants. They don't have that same connection, that same social fabric of protection, of knowledge, of knowing that you're cared for and that you're going to be okay regardless of what happens. And so in order to rebuild the social fabric, I think we're going to have to look at some really hard truths. African Americans who have moved away and not given back, and not, you know, when you look all the way back to W.E.B. Du Bois' Talented Tenth, the point was that you came back. And what has happened is so many of us have left and never come back. And so we just keep taking and doing a brain drain, if you will, in our own community. So we have to recommit to being present and also valuing the people and the resources and the resiliency and the skills that the people who stayed in the community do have. As Jimmy said, you know, right now, STEM is really big, right? So if you don't want to go into STEM, nobody cares, right? Nobody's willing to put you in an extra program. Nobody's willing to give you extra services or support. Nobody's willing to nurture you. Nobody's willing to mentor you. It's STEM, 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 STEM. But young people today, they want to hustle. They want to have their own businesses. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be self-sufficient because they've seen that the system doesn't work. So they don't trust the system anymore. So we can't deny them that opportunity. We need to be supporting them, as Jimmy said. We need to be creating opportunities for them to build those natural survival skills that can turn into business skills, that can turn into successful entrepreneurship. So we can't get so fixated. One of the things, even when I was growing up in the Midwest, it was engineering in my generation. Any smart Black kid needed to go to engineering school. And it sounds very silly, but I literally had a fight with my high school principal because I was like, I don't want to be an engineer. He's like, you need to go to engineering school. I can get you in and I can do it. I don't want to be an engineer. But it was a big fight. Yeah, I'm like, I want to be a doctor, but they were like, no, you need to be an engineer. And so when we decide what young people should be without even asking them what they want and what they need to get there, they're not going to follow the path. So did a lot of people from my school become engineers? Absolutely. Are all of them happy? No. I'll tell you that. Some of them right now will tell me to this day, I can't stand it. I'm trying to save my money so I can go do this and I can go do that. But it's hard. Some young people will follow and be miserable. Some of them will buck up against it and try to find their own path. And some will fall into other prey or other situations that aren't good. But we have to rebuild this fabric. We have to take care of each other. And we have to demand that programs meet our young people where they are and not, I don't know where they get these things from. I don't know why they decided engineering was so important when I was growing up. I don't know why they've decided that STEM is so important now. But one thing that COVID-19 has taught us is that we need a much more diverse workforce. We need a much more diverse group of next generation workers to do a whole lot of stuff that we have not been investing in as a country. So this is an opportunity for us to really look at how do we divest from the old ways of thinking, the old ways of funding, and the old ways of doing to be much more flexible and much more responsive to what young people need and what communities need.
Yeah. Hey, can I make one point? I wanted to.
We're gonna so we're getting ready to close out. So I want each of you to go ahead and, like you said, make your one point, say whatever it is that you think would want to leave off. So go ahead, Jimmy.
All right, I'm gonna say that little small point and then I'm gonna close out. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
You home, Jimmy. You family.
All right. So I just wanted to add also to that was the information piece. I think a lot of times we don't receive information and I'm speaking from a young person, even I'm speaking from a young business owner, even from the streets. Like, you'd be surprised that folks who really, everybody say they do outreach. Everybody in every field have a certain amount of dollars to do outreach. And I think outreach is piss poor when it comes to the city because there are so many people who are not receiving the information that could really make or break where they are in their life. You know, I'm just having conversations with young people who think, you know, for them to start their business, it might be $5,000. And I'm like, yo, them shoes you paying for, you can start your business with. You know what I mean? And so just little things like that. And even when you talk about, I think a lot of times people forget about the young adult moms, you know, they play a major role in this as well, is that some of these young moms don't know they can like get into a home buyers program or something like that, right? And kind of create some stability for themselves. You know, they was like, yo, I can get into, so it's like, we have the information, but folks who are in position, they either one, don't know how to connect to the community to get them the information, or two, they just don't give a damn. They don't give out the information. And so I think that's a lot, that information has a lot to do with why we struggle today. And then my closing point will be, is that there's no more accountability in no fields. You talk about our people, Black people. We don't have no accountability when you talk about, even when you talk about this, the celebrities that some of these young people look at, you know, there's no accountability. We don't hold they argue with each other, but they don't hold each other accountable, right? So it'll be a lot of mess going on. Because I look at the fact when we were protesting and, you know, the police brutality was going on about a few months ago during the pandemic, and how Will and Jada thought it was cool for them to just come out and talk about an entanglement. And I'm like, yo, that just distracted the people from, you know, staying focused on, you know, what we kind of need to focus on. And then that's just a small example of what goes on. And then when you talk about our people who are in government positions, you know, sometimes our people feel like they only gonna cater to their base, you know, and their base is the people that vote for them or the people that support their initiatives. And we forget about surface stuff, you know, and then even accountability when we talk about the streets, when we talk about gun violence. There's like, homies don't hold each other accountable no more. If you know that your homie is going to do something stupid, if he because everybody lets one person or two people know what they're about to do before they do it. You know, like, man, look, I'm ready to go spin that block. I'm about to go let off 100 rounds. If they can just do something as simple as, you say you about to go spin the block and let off 100 rounds, just repeat that to them, that could alarm them to like, yo, you get ready to do something real stupid. You know, and so I think the accountability piece is something that our community, Black people, is missing out. And then the last thing is, of course, the people who make it out. You should be held accountable. You should want to come back and be that positive image, or that want to come back and give back, because you grew up in the same environment as those of us who are growing up now. And so, yeah, man, that's just my last piece. That's my last piece.
Ronald, what say you?
And I wanted to say, as far as the entrepreneurship piece, why it's so important, because like a lot of our young people, I'm gonna be honest with you, and this is a taught behavior, they don't appreciate when people help. Right? And they don't supposed to earn it. Because I'm very conservative, by the way. I'm not one of these people think something's supposed to fall out of the sky, right? But I know that's a taught behavior. Booker T. Washington said it best: you can't get something for nothing.
You better not pull out no red hat now.
Hey, no, I'm not supporting Donald Trump. But listen, I'm gonna tell you something. When no Democrats would support me, it wasn't Donald Trump. It was a guy by the name of Jimmy Kemp, whose father had Black people owning public housing, who was supporting me and some gay children that nobody would support. So I was taught by civil rights leaders who taught me find good people wherever they at and stay away from bad people wherever they at, right? But what I was gonna say about entrepreneurship is that it's good because it teaches you, even if you fail, right, that how hard it is for somebody to create a job for you. So then when you go to get a job,
Uh-oh.
Mo?
We might have lost them. See, that's that conservative internet he talking about.
That's that Donald Trump internet.
No, we can. Hopefully he'll get back on. But in the meantime, what say you?
You know, I think I just want to remind people that healing takes time. And the analogy that we had about the wound, It's very rare that you get a wound, whether it's a shallow wound or whether it's a deep wound, and the next day when you wake up, it's healed. It takes time, it takes work, it takes effort. You have to keep that thing clean. You have to pay attention to it. There's a lot of work that it takes to heal. And so if we remember that about our communities, because a lot of times our communities want a quick fix and we want to give them a quick fix. But the reality is this has been going on for generations and it is going to take time to heal. And so we need to have the grace to give our communities the time to heal. That means we expect progress, but we don't expect overnight results.
Hey, Doc, you like that, Doc? I'm gonna steal your quote. You said that the wound doesn't heal from the outside in.
That's right.
Deep.
Thank
that
you.
was real deep. I like that right there. That's real.
Absolutely.
Y'all cut me off. She cut me off. She cut me off. I'm gonna say it real quick. What I was gonna say. What I was gonna say is that a lot of times us failing gives us the strength and give us our.
See, come on, Ron.
Nobody can say nothing or do nothing to put me down, right? And you got to give people the opportunity to fail, but you got to make sure they're surrounded with people who are going to pull them up and teach them and help them, right? Well, we got in our society, even people who are enablers, like public housing for 40 years and 4 generations of people living off of public housing ain't Republicans' fault. That's got something to do with liberalism as well, because a lot of liberals make money off our people sitting in public housing, and most of them don't look like us. So my point is, we got to make sure that our people, when they voting, when they marching, understand what it's going to take for them to get where they at. Like, even teach them to invest in stocks. Like, I was so mad at one of my friends when they was bragging to me about the $1.20 stock that TV1 had in June that went up to $42 a share. Do you know we took, and it's been done over and over again, some of these young boys and girls in the hoods, and sit them down with all the brilliance that they have and teach them the stock market and give them $100 to invest every month in it. Watch and see what they do. So, and they will be interested in that. And I'm gonna close with this. I had a workforce development program this summer, and we had 40 children. And I had Chase Bank do 2 workshops with them. It was only supposed to last 45 minutes for each one. Both of them last an hour and a half. You know why? Because when they started telling young people about building their credit up and how they can get a car without having a lot of money, how they can get a house, how they can do that, nobody never taught them that. And I know this because I didn't start learning this stuff until I was 40, and I'm 50 now. So what I'm saying is, we got to give the young people what some people gave us and what's going to get them out the conditions that they in, and stop letting people prey on our young people and abuse our young people and families, and then hold the ones who don't want to do nothing accountable.
That's true. That's true.
Star, you got 2 things today?
I got my 2 things as always. First, one, thank you. Gratitude, namaste. Thank you for sharing honestly and the wisdom you both brought to the table, and everybody, as always. But my first thing is that I think we've got to start seeing our community and our resources in a much broader light than what we can visually see or what we're comfortable interacting with on a regular basis. Because there are a lot of people that they may not even be from. It's not even I left the hood and now I left the neighborhood and now I live somewhere else. I'm not from there, but I may want to be of assistance and help, and I may have the resources, or at least know the people with resources who can be of help. So I think from outside the communities that are challenged, and for all parties involved, we've got to see our larger Black community in a much larger sense, basically everything Dr. T said. Like, we cannot see each other as others. I'm Black, I'm driving around, they see me as Black. They don't see me as you're worth this much, you're worth that much financially. They just like, oh, this is a Black woman and she might have stole the car. Who knows, right? So I think that would be my first thing. Visualizing your community and your network and your resources beyond what you even yourself know, right? And then 2, I would say for inside of the community, we've got to get rid of this. And I see it so much in DC specifically. We have to get rid of the I want to be cool. Everybody wants to be cool, so cool to the point they don't ask questions, they don't ask for resources, they don't leverage everything that the city has to offer. I have a friend who's in Silicon Valley right now. She quit her, six-figure job to build a company, and she just got, funded a couple weeks ago. But she was on like public assistance because that's what the white people, and the Asian kids do in Silicon Valley. They get healthcare through Medicare or Medicaid, and they use those resources. It's like a known fact, but we wouldn't do that. In many cases, a lot of us won't use and leverage resources that are available, or won't ask those questions because there's like a factor of like, oh, I don't want to seem like I don't want to seem like I don't know something. So I would just say, your pool of resources is larger than what you can visibly see. There are people that want you to win. Like, I'm going to reach out to Jimmy. Jimmy, I'm going to get your email, and you and I are going to work together. I'm going to do what I can do and share my network so that you can help build your school and whatever else you want to do, because I can see you're somebody that has the ideas. You just need some funding, and you need some people behind you that can maybe help you navigate. So bigger community, and then, stop worrying about being cool so much. Cool will get your ass in trouble. I almost didn't go to college trying to be cool because I was going to cut hair. I graduated from Bladensburg Barber School, and I'm like, hold up. I don't want to be cutting hair off East Capitol Street for the rest of my life. I'm going to A&T. So those are my two things.
So I'm going to find a way to incorporate A&T.
And being a barber.
Are you talking about the Aggie Fest?
Yes.
I just give me some A&T women. I hear no disclaimer.
Virginia State is where it's at, baby.
The Aggie Fest.
So, to close out, I think I definitely would piggyback on what Star said there. There was a moment in my life where I had lost my job years ago, and I did not want to put me or my daughter on any type of assistance because I felt like I would look like I'm a stereotype. So to that point of being cool, a lot of times we just don't want to subscribe to a narrative because we feel like we shouldn't have to. I think that to the point of Dr. Royster is the wound. For many years, a lot of us we have these wounds that we're not cleaning out, that we're not working on, or that we keep trying to cover up without cleaning from the inside. And that goes back to like violence breeding violence. Me growing up was very violent. And so my first language has always been violence. And so I would welcome the day when someone approached me with violence because I couldn't wait, as Ronald said, to impart that violence on them because that's how I felt inside. And so it's taken a long time, and it's still a journey. And I think we consciously have to be aware of, the wounds that we are carrying and how we can start cleaning them from the inside out. I think in part, the last thing that I would just say is that I think that, as Jimmy mentioned, as Ronald mentioned, we have to do the accountability. We have to be willing to share information. No matter who it is, we have to look at each other, as Star mentioned, as brother and sister, and really be willing to help through these circumstances that we keep going through the generations, because we can get through that. We don't have to be the fourth year, in the projects. We can do so much more. In DC, I always said, it was funny, when I was in school, all the DC dudes would hang out at Foster Hall, and they would never tell they was the smartest dudes. All of them was in engineering classes. All of them was in a whole bunch of stuff, but they was cool. You didn't know. And all of them now are pretty much making over six figures, but it was just like, they didn't want people to know just how smart they are. But we are a resilient community. We are a community that is brilliant. We have invented half of the things that we use in America. And I think that we have a lot of promise and a lot of capability to help make these streets better for us. And we need that fabric. We need that community inside. And so we thank you both for taking part in this. Thank you for sharing your truth, and we really appreciate it. And we out.
Bless you.
Appreciate y'all.